Marcus Romano's hands wouldn't stop shaking. 3 days. The envelope had been sitting on his kitchen counter for 3 days, and he'd walked past it maybe 50 times, each time telling himself tomorrow. Tomorrow he'd open it. Tomorrow he'd be ready. But how do you prepare yourself for the end of everything you thought you knew? The return address stared back at him. Seoul, South Korea. A place he'd never been. A country he had no connection to. Yet someone there knew his name, knew his address, knew something about him that required a letter sent across an ocean. Marcus stood alone in his Brooklyn studio apartment, the Tuesday evening quiet broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the distant scream of sirens below. The letter felt heavier than it should, just paper and ink, but weighted with the kind of truth that changes lives. What if everything you thought you knew about your family was a lie? His father had been dead for 2 years. Vincent Romano, construction company owner, ex-mafia enforcer turned legitimate businessman, stern but loving father. The man who'd taught Marcus to throw a baseball, to stand up for himself, to never ask questions about the old days. Gone. Heart attack at 63. Buried with full honors, hundreds at the funeral, everyone whispering about respect and the old neighborhood. So why was someone in Korea writing to his son? Marcus's finger slid under the seal, tearing it open before he could change his mind again. The paper inside was delicate, almost translucent. The handwriting was neat, careful English but with phrasing that felt foreign, learned from textbooks rather than conversation. Dear Marcus Romano, you do not know me but I know you. More importantly, I knew your father, not the man you called father, but the man he truly was before he became Vincent Romano of the Brooklyn Mafia. Marcus's breath caught. His eyes raced ahead, unable to slow down. I knew him as Park Jin-woo. A young man who left Seoul 35 years ago with blood on his hands and a broken heart. No, this was insane. Some sick joke. His father was Italian. Sicilian roots, the old country, Sunday dinners with red sauce and stories about. Your father had another life here. Another family. Another son. The room tilted. Marcus grabbed the counter to steady himself, but his eyes kept reading, pulled forward like a car with failed brakes. I am writing to you because you deserve to know the truth. Your father was not born in Sicily, as he told everyone. He was born in Busan, Korea, to a family involved in what we call the Japuk, our version of what you know as the Mafia. He left behind more than just his country when he fled. He left behind a woman he loved, a child he never met, and secrets that have haunted those of us who remain. If you want to know who your father really was, who you really are, come to Seoul. I will tell you everything. The choice is yours. Lee Sung-min. Marcus read it 3 times. Each word carved deeper into the foundation of everything he'd built his life on. His father wasn't Italian. He was Korean. His father had another son. A brother Marcus never knew existed. 33 years of his life a lie. One elaborate, carefully constructed lie. Have you ever uncovered something about your family that shook you to your core? Marcus would later ask himself again and again, in the sleepless nights that followed. What if the person who raised you wasn't who they said they were? What if your entire identity was built on a foundation of carefully maintained fiction? But in that moment, standing alone in his apartment with a letter from a stranger in Korea, Marcus couldn't form questions. He could barely breathe. Because somewhere across the ocean, a man claiming to be his brother was waiting with the truth about Park Jin-woo, the man Marcus had only ever known as Vincent Romano, his father. His father, Vincent Romano, had died 2 years ago. A heart attack at 63, sudden and brutal. The funeral had been attended by hundreds, old associates from his business days, men in expensive suits who spoke in low voices about respect and honor. Vincent had been out of the life for nearly 20 years by then, running a legitimate construction company, but everyone knew what he'd been. Everyone knew the kind of man he was, or thought they knew. Marcus walked to his bedroom, pulled out the shoebox he kept under his bed. Inside were the few possessions his father had left him. A gold watch, some old photographs, a diary with most pages torn out. He'd looked through these items 100 times since the funeral, searching for something. Comfort, understanding, closure. He'd found none of it. Now he looked at the photographs with new eyes. His father, young and lean in a leather jacket, standing in front of what Marcus had always assumed was an Italian restaurant. But now he noticed the signs in the background weren't in Italian or English. The characters were different, angular. Korean. Another photo. His father with a woman. Marcus had always been told this was some distant cousin, taken during a trip to Europe. But the woman's features were unmistakably Asian. She was beautiful with long dark hair and eyes that held both joy and sadness. Her hand rested on his father's arm with unmistakable intimacy. "Jesus Christ," Marcus whispered, sinking onto his bed. His phone buzzed. A text from his girlfriend, asking if he wanted to grab dinner. He ignored it. The diary. He'd never been able to make much sense of it before. Most pages were missing, and the ones that remained were cryptic. Dates, names that meant nothing to him. The occasional phrase like, "can't go back" or "she'll never forgive me." Now he flipped through it with purpose, looking for anything Korean. On one of the last pages he found it. A phone number with a country code he now recognized as South Korea's. Below it, a single word in his father's handwriting. Sungmin. The person who'd written the letter. Marcus sat there for an hour, maybe more, the letter in one hand and the diary in the other. His mind raced through every memory of his father. The stern discipline, the lessons about honor and loyalty, the way Vincent had always seemed to carry some invisible weight on his shoulders. Marcus had attributed it to the guilt of his criminal past, the violence he participated in as a young man in the Italian mafia. Now he wondered if there was something else, something deeper, more personal. "Have you ever uncovered something about your family that shook you to your core?" Marcus would have asked if anyone had been there to listen. What if everything you thought you knew about your family was a lie? What if the person who raised you wasn't who they said they were? But he was alone in his apartment with these questions, and no one to answer them. The next morning Marcus called in sick to work. He taught history at a public high school in Queens. A job he loved, a life he'd built carefully after deciding not to follow in his father's footsteps, criminal or otherwise. He'd always prided himself on being different from Vincent. Clean. Honest. American. Now he wondered what American even meant when his father apparently wasn't Italian at all, but Korean. He spent the day researching. The Japuk, he learned, was indeed Korea's equivalent of the mafia. Organized crime syndicates that had flourished in the chaos following the Korean War. They ran everything from gambling to prostitution to drug trafficking, with elaborate hierarchies and codes of conduct that rivaled anything the Italian mafia had ever created. Park Jin-woo. He typed the name into search engines, found nothing. If his father had truly been part of that world, his trail had been deliberately erased. Or perhaps Vincent Romano had simply been too careful even back then. By evening, Marcus had made his decision. He booked a flight to Seoul, leaving in 5 days. He requested a leave of absence from work, family emergency, he told his principal, which wasn't entirely a lie. He didn't tell his girlfriend the real reason, just that he needed to take care of some inheritance issues related to his father's estate. The lies came easily. He supposed that was in his blood too. The days before his departure passed in a blur of preparation and doubt. Marcus found himself looking at his reflection differently, searching for traces of Korean heritage in his features. His olive skin, which he'd always attributed to his Italian roots, could just as easily be East Asian. His dark eyes, the particular shape of his nose, suddenly everything seemed ambiguous, as if his own face had become a puzzle he'd never properly solved. He told his mother he was taking a trip. Diane Romano, her maiden name had been Kowalski, Polish through and through, had remarried 5 years after Vincent's death and now lived in Florida. When Marcus mentioned he was going to Korea, she'd gone silent on the phone for a long moment. "Why Korea?" she finally asked. "Just always wanted to visit," he lied. Another long pause. "Your father went there once. Before we met. He never talked about it." Marcus's heart raced. Did he ever mention anyone named Lee Sung-min? No. But there were a lot of things your father didn't mention. After they hung up, Marcus realized his mother must have known something. Maybe not everything, but something. The way she'd hesitated, the careful neutrality in her voice. These were the sounds of old secrets trying not to surface. He pulled out the photographs again, studying them under a brighter light. The woman with his father. He could see it now, the resemblance between her face and his own. The shape of the eyes, the line of the jaw. Vincent was Park Jin-woo and this woman was… what? His first wife. His lover. Then Marcus might be. He couldn't finish the thought. It was too enormous, too world-altering. On his last night in New York, Marcus met his best friend Tony for drinks at their usual bar in the Bronx. Tony had grown up in the neighborhood with him, knew his father's reputation, had attended the funeral. "So you're really going to Seoul?" Tony asked, nursing a beer. "Since when do you care about Asia?" "I'm a history teacher, man. I care about everywhere." "Bullshit. What's really going on?" Marcus considered telling him. Tony had always been loyal, discreet. But some part of him, maybe the part that was Vincent Romano's son or Park Jin-woo's son, or whoever the hell's son he was, knew that some secrets were meant to be carried alone, at least at first. "Just need to clear my head," Marcus said. "Figure some things out." Tony studied him over his beer. "This about your old man? Everything's about our old men, isn't it? Do you think family secrets are ever really buried?" Marcus wanted to ask. "Or do they always come back to haunt us?" Instead, he drank his beer and changed the subject to the Yankees' pitching rotation. The flight to Seoul was 14 hours, enough time to read through every scrap of information he'd compiled about his father's possible past. Marcus had printed out articles about the Jopic in the 1980s, the period when Vincent would have been in his 20s. It had been a violent era, with gang wars erupting over territory and power. Dozens had died. Many more had disappeared. One article mentioned a gang called the Sanjeong-pa, the Twin Dragons. They'd been one of the most powerful syndicates in Seoul before their sudden collapse in 1989. The details were sparse, but the article mentioned internal betrayal, a power struggle that had ended with the gang's leadership either dead or in prison. One name was mentioned among those who disappeared. Park Jin-woo, a rising enforcer known for his strategic mind and his connections to international smuggling routes. The man had vanished shortly before the gang's collapse. Presumed dead by most accounts, though no body had ever been found. Marcus read the passage 3 times. His father would have been 28 in 1989, the right age. And if Park Jin-woo had fled Korea for America, reinvented himself as an Italian mobster, it would explain so much. The way Vincent had always seemed to know more than he should about Asian criminal organizations. His occasional comments in what Marcus now realized might have been Korean, quickly covered up as just some words I picked up in the service. His father had never served in the military. That had been another lie. The plane descended through thick clouds and Seoul appeared below. A sprawling metropolis of glass towers and ancient temples, rivers of light flowing through streets that never seemed to end. Marcus pressed his face to the window, feeling his heart pound. Somewhere down there was the truth. Somewhere down there was a man named Lee Sung-min who held the keys to his father's past. Somewhere down there, Marcus might discover he had a brother. The thought had been growing in his mind since he'd first read the letter. Another family. Another son. What did that mean exactly? Had his father married before fleeing Korea? Had he abandoned a wife and child? Or was it more complicated than that? Could my father really have been a monster? Marcus wondered as the plane touched down. Or was he just a man caught in circumstances beyond his control? He didn't know which answer frightened him more. The air in Seoul was different, thick with humidity even in October, carrying scents Marcus couldn't identify. Spicy, sweet, sharp all at once. Incheon International Airport was massive and efficient, with signs in Korean and English guiding him through immigration. When the officer stamped his passport, Marcus felt like he was crossing more than just a border. He was crossing into a version of himself he'd never known existed. The hotel he'd booked was in Gangnam, a district of Seoul known for its wealth and nightlife. Marcus had chosen it precisely because it was anonymous, a place where he could blend in among business travelers and tourists. He needed time to acclimate before meeting Lee Sung-min, before confronting whatever truth awaited him. His first morning in Seoul, Marcus woke at 4 a.m., jet-lagged and disoriented. He lay in the dark hotel room listening to the sounds of the city beyond his window. Early morning traffic, the distant rumble of the subway, voices speaking in a language he didn't understand but somehow felt he should. His father had spoken this language, had grown up hearing these same rhythms and tones, had probably stood on these same streets young and dangerous before everything went wrong. When dawn finally came, Marcus ventured out. The streets of Gangnam were cleaner than he'd expected, more orderly. Glass and steel towers reflected the morning sun. Well-dressed businesspeople hurried to offices. It could have been any major city, except for the signs in Hangul, the smell of kimchi from open restaurants, the Buddhist temple he passed that seemed to exist in deliberate defiance of the modernity surrounding it. He bought coffee from a convenience store, stronger and sweeter than American coffee, and wandered without direction. A park revealed itself at the end of a street, and he sat on a bench, watching elderly people practice Tai Chi in synchronized groups. Children played on equipment while their mothers chatted nearby. It was so normal, so peaceful. Hard to imagine this was the same city where his father had allegedly been an enforcer for a violent crime syndicate. But then Brooklyn could look pretty peaceful too if you knew where to look and when. Violence didn't announce itself in the architecture. On his second day, Marcus began following the clues from his father's diary. The phone number with Sungmin's name led nowhere, disconnected or changed. But there were addresses, written in English next to their Korean counterparts. One was in a neighborhood called Itaewon, historically known for its international character, and, according to Marcus's research, its connection to organized crime in the 1980s and 90s. The building at the address was old, wedged between a tattoo parlor and a vintage clothing store. For stories, concrete, with air conditioning units jutting from windows like barnacles. Marcus stood across the street for 10 minutes, gathering courage. Then he crossed and pressed the buzzer for apartment 3B, the unit number from his father's diary. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. "Can I help you?" Marcus turned. An elderly Korean woman stood behind him, carrying grocery bags and eyeing him with suspicion. "I'm looking for someone who used to live here," Marcus said slowly, hoping she understood English. "Park Jin-woo." The woman's expression changed immediately. Hardened. "No one here by that name. Please, I'm his." "No one here. You go." She pushed past him, used her key to open the building's front door, and disappeared inside. The door clicked shut with finality. Marcus stood on the sidewalk, frustration building in his chest. He'd come all this way, and he didn't even know how to begin finding answers. He couldn't speak Korean, didn't know the city, was operating on clues that were over 3 decades old. These aren't just photos, he thought, pulling out his phone to look at the scanned images he'd saved. They're pieces of a life I never knew, my father's life. What do I even do with this? A coffee shop across the street had outdoor seating. Marcus ordered in English. The barista was young and accommodating, and sat where he could watch the building. It was a long shot, but he had nothing else. 3 hours passed. The coffee shop's Wi-Fi allowed him to continue researching, though he found little new information. The Sanjeongpa gang had been thoroughly dismantled. Most of its leaders were dead or imprisoned. The few who'd escaped had disappeared into new identities, new lives. Like his father. Around 3 p.m., a man emerged from the building. He was in his 50s, well-dressed in slacks and a button-down shirt, carrying a briefcase. Something about his gait, the set of his shoulders, reminded Marcus of his father. He stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his coffee. The man walked down the street. Marcus followed at a distance, trying to appear casual. They walked for several blocks, into an even older neighborhood where the buildings seemed to lean against each other for support. The man entered a small restaurant, a traditional place with paper lanterns and low tables visible through the windows. Marcus waited 5 minutes, then followed him inside. The interior was dim and warm, smelling of grilled meat and fermented vegetables. The man sat alone at a corner table, already ordering from a waitress. Marcus approached, his heart hammering. "Excuse me," he said. "Do you speak English?" The man looked up, his expression neutral. "Yes. Some. I'm looking for someone. Lee Sungmin. Do you know him?" Something flickered across the man's face. Recognition, wariness. "Who are you?" "My name is Marcus Romano. I received a letter from Lee Sungmin about my father, Park Jin-woo." The man stared at him for a long moment. Then he gestured to the empty seat across from him. "Sit." Marcus sat. "You are Jin-woo's son," the man said. It wasn't a question. "You look like him. Especially the eyes." "You knew my father?" Everyone in the old neighborhood knew Jin-woo. Before he left. The man's expression was difficult to read. My name is Kim Dae-hyun. I worked with your father. Long time ago. The waitress brought a bottle of soju and 2 glasses. Dae-hyun poured for both of them. A ritual Marcus recognized from research, even if he didn't fully understand its significance. To absent friends, Dae-hyun said in English, raising his glass. They drank. The soju burned going down. I need to find Lee Sung-min, Marcus said. He wrote to me. Said he'd tell me about my father. Sung-min is careful. He has reasons. Dae-hyun poured more soju. Your father left many questions behind when he disappeared. Some people are still angry. Some people still want answers. What kind of answers? The kind that get people killed. Dae-hyun met his eyes. You should go home, Marcus Romano. There is nothing good for you here. Only ghosts and old debts. I can't go home. Not until I know the truth. Dae-hyun sighed. The truth. Jinwoo used to say that too. I just want the truth, he would say. But truth is dangerous. Truth has consequences. I don't care. You should. Dae-hyun pulled out his phone, typed something, showed Marcus the screen. An address in Gangnam, not far from Marcus's hotel. This is where Sung-min works. He owns a taekwondo studio. Go tomorrow evening after 6. Tell him Dae-hyun sent you. But remember what I said. Some things are better left buried. Have you ever found something about your family that left you questioning everything? Marcus thought as he walked back to his hotel through Seoul's neon-lit streets. The question echoed in his mind with every step, mixing with the sounds of the city, the smell of street food, the faces of people who might share his blood without knowing it. He was here to uncover truth, yes. But Dae-hyun's warning lingered. Truth has consequences. His father had fled those consequences 35 years ago, built a new life on top of lies. Now Marcus was about to dig through those layers of deception, and he had no idea what he might unleash. The taekwondo studio was on the 3rd floor of a modern building in the heart of Gangnam, sandwiched between a cosmetics store and a language academy. Through the large window, Marcus could see rows of students in white doboks, executing synchronized kicks, their movements sharp and precise. A sign in Korean and English read, Lee's traditional taekwondo, discipline, respect, excellence. Marcus climbed the stairs at 6:15 p.m., as instructed. His palms were sweating. In a few minutes he might meet someone who could rewrite his entire understanding of his father, his family, himself. The studio's interior was immaculate. Polished wooden floors, mirrors along one wall, Korean flags and martial arts philosophy posters on the others. The class was ending, children bowing to their instructor before running to collect their shoes. The instructor was a man in his 40s, lean and muscular, with graying hair and a face that Marcus recognized immediately. It was like looking at a version of himself aged up by 15 years. Same eyes, same jawline, same way of holding his shoulders. The resemblance was unmistakable. The instructor saw Marcus and froze mid-conversation with a parent. For a moment, neither man moved. Then the instructor said something quick in Korean to the parent and walked over. Marcus Romano, he said in English. It wasn't a question. Lee Sung-min. Come to my office. The children don't need to hear this. The office was small and tidy, with certificates on the walls and photographs of taekwondo competitions. Sung-min closed the door and turned to face Marcus. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. They had the same nose, the same slightly crooked smile. If anyone saw them together, they'd know immediately these men were related. You came, Sung-min said. I wasn't sure you would. You wrote to me. Told me my father had another life, another son. Marcus's voice came out harsher than intended. What did you expect? Honestly? I expected anger. Americans are raised to believe their parents don't lie to them. Sung-min's English was excellent, with a British accent underlying the Korean. Please sit. They sat in folding chairs facing each other. Is it true? Marcus asked. Is Park Jin-woo really Vincent Romano? My father. Yes. He changed his name when he fled to America in 1989. Before that, he was one of the rising stars of the Sanjeongpa. Smart, ruthless when he needed to be, loyal to the gang. Until he wasn't. What happened? Sung-min leaned back, considering his words carefully. Your father, our father, fell in love with my mother, Kim So-yeon. She was the daughter of a rival gang leader. Their relationship was forbidden, dangerous. But Jinwoo was never good at following rules, even the ones meant to keep him alive. So you're my... Marcus couldn't quite say the word. Half-brother. Yes. Sungmin's expression was complicated. Not hostile, but not warm either. I was born in 1988. Jinwoo and my mother kept me secret for almost a year. But in our world, secrets don't stay buried. When the Sanjeongpa leadership found out, they gave Jinwoo a choice. Kill my mother and me, or be killed himself. Marcus felt his chest tighten. What did he do? He chose a third option. He went to my mother's father, made a deal. He would betray the Sanjeongpa, help destroy them from within, in exchange for protection for my mother and me. It worked. The gang collapsed. Dozens died. And Jinwoo disappeared before anyone could exact revenge. He abandoned you. He saved us. Sungmin's voice was firm. My mother's family gave us protection, gave me a good life. Jinwoo couldn't stay. He would have brought violence down on us. So he left. Made a new life in America. Became Vincent Romano, married your mother, had you. Died never telling you the truth. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Why tell me now? Marcus asked. If he wanted it kept secret. Because you deserve to know who you are. Because I've carried this secret my whole life, and I'm tired of it. Because... Sungmin paused. Because our father is dead. And the debts he left behind are coming due. People here still remember. Still want answers or revenge or both. When I heard he died, I thought the story was over. But then I learned about you. His American son. And I realized the story never ends, not really. It just gets passed down. Marcus stood abruptly, pacing the small office. His mind was spinning. I have a brother. My father was Korean. He was a criminal here before he was a criminal in America. He had a whole family he left behind. Jesus Christ. I know this is difficult. Difficult. Marcus laughed bitterly. I'm a high school history teacher from Brooklyn. I teach kids about the Civil War and the Constitution. I've spent my whole life trying to be nothing like my father, nothing like the gangster, the criminal. And now you're telling me that wasn't even his real identity? That there's another layer of lies underneath. Sungmin stood too. I didn't write to you to hurt you. I wrote because you're my brother. Because we share blood, a father, a history. Because I thought you should know you're not alone in carrying his legacy. Legacy? Marcus shook his head. Is that what we call it? They stood there, two men who'd grown up on opposite sides of the world, shaped by the same absent father in completely different ways. Marcus could see himself in Sungmin's face, in his posture, in the way he held his jaw when he was upset. It was like looking into a distorted mirror. I need air, Marcus said, moving toward the door. Wait. Sungmin grabbed his arm. There's something else you need to know. The reason I really wrote to you. Marcus turned back. Our father's past isn't as buried as he thought. There's a man, Park Junho. He was Jinwoo's best friend in the Sanjeongpa. He survived the collapse, spent 20 years in prison. He was released 6 months ago. And he's been looking for information about what happened to Jinwoo. So he knows Jinwoo is dead. But he doesn't know about you. Not yet. If he finds out Jinwoo had an American son. Sungmin's grip tightened. Junho believes Jinwoo betrayed him specifically. Testified against him to American authorities in exchange for safe passage to the U.S. It's not true, but Junho doesn't care about truth. He cares about revenge. And since Jinwoo is dead, he'll come for Jinwoo's family instead. Marcus felt cold. You're saying I'm in danger? I'm saying we both are. I'm saying you coming to Seoul asking questions might draw attention we don't want. I wrote to you because I thought you deserved to know the truth before trouble found you anyway. I wrote because... Sungmin released his arm. Because if something's going to happen, I'd rather face it with family than alone. They looked at each other, these brothers who'd grown up strangers. I don't know what to do with this, Marcus admitted. Any of it. Neither do I, Sungmin said. But we'll figure it out. Together. That's what brothers do, right? Marcus didn't answer. He left the studio and walked through Gangnam's busy streets for hours, his mind unable to settle on any single thought. Everything was too big, too impossible. He had a brother. His father had been running not just from the Italian mafia but from Korean debts that predated his American life. And now those debts might find Marcus, an ocean away from the safety he'd always known. I thought I was just American, he found himself thinking as he walked past Korean barbecue restaurants and karaoke bars and shops selling things he couldn't identify. But now I don't know. How do you fit into a world when you've spent your whole life outside of it? The question had no answer, at least not yet. But as Seoul's neon lights flickered to life around him, Marcus knew he couldn't leave. Not now. Not until he understood who his father really was, and what that meant for who Marcus himself might become. Marcus spent the next week following the traces of his father's past through Seoul, like a ghost hunting another ghost. Sungmin became his guide, reluctant at first but warming as they spent more time together. They visited places Jinwoo had frequented in the 1980s, bars that had become coffee shops, gambling dens that were now restaurants, the headquarters of the Sanjeongpa that had been torn down and replaced with a children's daycare center. Ironic, isn't it? Sungmin said as they stood outside the daycare, watching young mothers pick up their children. All that violence, all those men who thought they'd build an empire. Now there's a slide where they used to plan assassinations. Marcus photographed everything with his phone, documenting this secret history. He was still a teacher at heart, still driven to understand and contextualize. But the more he learned, the more questions multiplied. They met with Sungmin's mother one evening at her apartment in an older part of Seoul. Kim So-yeon was 62, elegant despite her age, with eyes that held both warmth and deep sadness. She served them tea and spoke to Marcus in Korean, which Sungmin translated. "She says you have Jinwoo's hands," Sungmin said. "The way you hold your teacup, it's exactly how he used to do it." Marcus looked at his hands, seeing them differently. Suddenly every gesture felt loaded with meaning. Every unconscious movement a potential echo of a man who'd lived in two worlds. So-yeon spoke for almost an hour, telling the story of her relationship with Jinwoo. Sungmin translated, his voice sometimes catching on the emotional parts. Their love had been genuine but doomed from the start. Jinwoo had promised he'd find a way for them to be together, but the constraints of their world had been too powerful. When she'd gotten pregnant, they'd both known it would force a reckoning. "She says Jinwoo cried the night before he left," Sungmin translated. "He held me, I was only 1 year old, and he cried." She'd never seen him cry before. "He said he was sorry, that this was the only way to keep us safe. Then he kissed me goodbye and walked out." She never saw him again. So-yeon wiped her eyes, said something else in Korean. "She wants you to know he wasn't a monster," Sungmin said. "He was a good man caught in a bad life. He tried to do the right thing, even when the right thing meant losing everything." Marcus felt his own eyes burning. "Did she ever try to contact him?" Sungmin asked. So-yeon shook her head, speaking rapidly. "She says no. It would have been too dangerous. And besides, she'd heard he married, had a family. She didn't want to ruin that for him. She says love sometimes means letting someone go completely, even when it breaks your heart." After they left So-yeon's apartment, Marcus and Sungmin walked through a night market, navigating crowds of shoppers and street food vendors. The smells were overwhelming. Spicy tteokbokki, sweet hotteok, grilled meat from every corner. "Try this," Sungmin said, buying them both skewers of fish cake and broth. "It was Jinwoo's favorite. My mother used to make it for him." Marcus took a bite. It was savory and comforting, the kind of food that felt like memory, even when you'd never tasted it before. "Do you hate him?" Marcus asked. "For leaving?" Sungmin considered this, chewing slowly. "I used to. When I was young I hated him desperately. I'd see my friends with their fathers and I'd feel this rage. But as I got older I understood. He made an impossible choice. He could stay and watch us die or leave and let us live. What would you do?" "I don't know." "Exactly. That's the hardest part. Knowing you can't judge him because you've never faced what he faced." They walked in silence for a while, just two brothers navigating a night market. "What was your childhood like?" Sungmin asked. "In America?" Marcus told him. The Brooklyn neighborhood, the Catholic school, his father's transformation from gangster to businessman, the way Vincent had been stern but loving in his own reserved way. He told him about learning to throw a baseball, about Sunday dinners with extended family who weren't actually related by blood, about the funeral where hundreds of people had come to pay their respects to a man they thought they knew. It sounds nice, Sungmin said. Despite everything. What about you? Sungmin's story was different but parallel. His mother's family had protected them but at a cost. Sungmin had grown up knowing his father had been a criminal, knowing that respect was mixed with shame. He'd thrown himself into Taekwondo as a teenager, finding discipline and purpose in the martial art. He'd built his studio from nothing, created a life he could be proud of. But I always wondered, Sungmin admitted, what it would have been like if Jinwoo had stayed. If we could have been a real family. We were all wondering that, Marcus said. In our own ways. I'm starting to realize that identity is more than where you're born. Marcus thought as they walked. It's about what you carry with you, what you choose to keep close. And he was carrying so much now. His American upbringing, his father's Italian-American persona, the Korean heritage he'd never known existed, the brother walking beside him, the mother who'd loved Jinwoo and let him go. The next day, they visited the cemetery where many Sanjeongpa members were buried. The graves were modest, some with photos of the dead affixed to the headstones. Young men, most of them frozen in their 20s or 30s, killed in the gang wars of the 1980s. Jinwoo could have been any one of them, Sungmin said. If he'd stayed, he'd probably be in this ground. He chose life instead. Maybe that makes him a coward, maybe that makes him smart. I don't know anymore. Marcus knelt by one of the graves, reading the dates. 1965 to 1989. 24 years old. These men were all so young. That was the life. Fast money, fast death. Sungmin pulled out a small bottle of soju from his bag, poured some on the ground in front of several graves. For the ones who didn't make it out. They stood in silence, paying respects to ghosts. Marcus understood now why his father had rarely talked about his youth, why there were so few stories from before he'd arrived in America. Every memory was probably a funeral, a friend lost, a choice that had led to violence. Over the following days, Marcus met more people from his father's past. There was an old woman who'd run a restaurant where the Sanjeongpa members had gathered. She remembered Jinwoo as polite, always helping her carry heavy bags even when his friends mocked him for it. There was a former police officer who tried to arrest Jinwoo 3 times but had always come up empty. He respected the cleverness even as he'd hated what Jinwoo represented. There was a man who'd been Jinwoo's mentor in the early days, now elderly and confined to a nursing home, who told them stories about a young Park Jinwoo who'd been brilliant at strategy but terrible at poker. Each person added another piece to the puzzle. Marcus began to see his father not as Vincent Romano, the stern Italian-American construction company owner, but as Park Jinwoo, a complex young man navigating a dangerous world, making choices that were sometimes noble and sometimes terrible, always trying to survive. You know what's strange? Marcus said one evening as they sat in Sungmin's apartment, sharing dinner that Sungmin had cooked, bulgogi and rice and kimchi. I feel like I'm getting to know my father for the first time. The real him, not the persona he created. Is that good or bad? Both. Neither. I don't know. Marcus picked at his food. He lied to me my whole life. But he also gave me a good life. He kept me safe from all of this. Part of me wishes he'd told me the truth. Part of me understands why he didn't. That's the thing about parents, Sungmin said. They're just people. Flawed, complicated people trying their best. We spend our childhoods thinking they're heroes or monsters, and then we grow up and realize they're neither. They're just human. I came here to understand him, Marcus thought. But what I've learned is about who I am. The realization felt profound and terrifying. He wasn't just Vincent Romano's son from Brooklyn. He was Park Jinwoo's son, connected to this city, these people, this history. He carried Korean blood, Korean heritage, a whole identity he'd never known to claim. Have you thought about learning Korean? Sungmin asked, as if reading his thoughts. I wouldn't even know where to start. I could teach you. The basics at least. You should be able to speak your father's language. The offer hung in the air. It was more than just language lessons. It was an invitation to fully embrace this new identity, to stop being a tourist in his own heritage and start becoming something more. Okay, Marcus said. Teach me. They started that night. Simple phrases. Hello, thank you, my name is. Marcus's pronunciation was terrible, his tones all wrong, but Sungmin was patient. They laughed at Marcus's mistakes, and in those moments of laughter, the strangeness of their situation, two brothers meeting for the first time as adults, faded into something more natural. "You sound like a drunk American trying to order food," Sungmin teased. "I am a drunk American trying to order food." Fair point. But underneath the levity, Marcus was aware of time passing. He'd been in Seoul for 2 weeks. His leave from work would end soon. At some point, he'd have to return to Brooklyn, to his apartment and his job and his girlfriend who was starting to ask pointed questions about when exactly he'd be coming home. The thought of leaving felt wrong now. He was just beginning to understand this place, this part of himself. "What happens when I go back?" Marcus asked Sungmin one morning as they jogged through a park near the Han River. They'd fallen into a routine: morning runs, afternoon language lessons, evenings visiting people or places connected to their father. "You go back. Resume your life. We stay in touch." Sungmin paused at a water fountain. "Unless you don't want to." "No, I do. It feels incomplete. Like I'm leaving in the middle of the story. The story doesn't end. It just continues in different places." But Marcus wasn't sure that was true. Something was unfinished here, some thread left dangling. He felt it in the way certain people looked at him when Sungmin introduced him as Jinwoo's son. He felt it in the questions no one quite asked but that lingered in the air. He felt it in the occasional car that seemed to follow them, or the figure he sometimes saw watching from across the street. He mentioned this to Sungmin on their 3rd week in Seoul. "I think someone's following us." Sungmin's expression tightened. "What makes you say that?" "Just a feeling. Maybe I'm paranoid." "Paranoia kept our father alive for a long time. Don't dismiss it." That evening, as Marcus walked back to his hotel from Sungmin's studio, he was certain. A black sedan trailed him for 6 blocks before turning off. When he stopped at a convenience store, a man in a suit stood outside smoking, watching. When Marcus exited, the man was gone. He called Sungmin. "I'm not imagining it. Come back to my apartment. Now. Don't take a taxi, use the subway, change lines twice." Marcus followed the instructions, his heart racing. He felt ridiculous, like he was in a spy movie. But he also remembered his father's lessons about always being aware of your surroundings, always having an exit plan. Vincent had taught him those things framed as general life advice. Now Marcus understood they were survival skills from a previous life. At Sungmin's apartment, his brother looked serious. "I was hoping we'd have more time before Junho made his move." "You think it's him?" "Who else? He's been asking questions about Jinwoo, about family. Someone probably told him about the American asking questions, putting the pieces together." "What does he want?" "I told you. Revenge. Answers. Maybe both." Marcus sat down heavily on Sungmin's couch. "This is insane. I'm a high school teacher. I don't know how to deal with whatever this is. You're also Jinwoo's son. That means something here, whether you like it or not." "Great. So what do we do?" Sungmin was quiet for a moment. "We could run. You could go back to America, I could move to another city. Try to disappear like Jinwoo did. Or we face it. Find out what Junho wants. See if there's a way to end this without violence." Marcus looked at his brother. This man he'd known for only 3 weeks but who felt more like family than most people he'd grown up with. "What would our father do? Jinwoo? He'd probably find a clever third option we haven't thought of yet. He was good at that. Then we should be good at it too. It's in our blood, right?" Sungmin smiled grimly. "Right." They decided to force the confrontation rather than wait for it to come to them. Sungmin put out word through old contacts that Park Jinwoo's sons wanted to meet with Park Junho to settle whatever grievances existed. The response came within 2 days. A meeting at a restaurant in Itaewon neutral territory, just the 3 of them. "He'll probably bring people anyway," Sungmin warned as they prepared. "Men like Junho don't take chances. Should we bring people too? Who would we bring? We're not gangsters, Marcus. We're just the sons of one." The restaurant was expensive, the kind of place where businessmen took clients and politicians held discreet meetings. Marcus wore his best suit. He'd bought it for his father's funeral and hadn't worn it since. Sungmin wore traditional Korean formal wear, a hanbok, which surprised Marcus. Respect, Sungmin explained. We're acknowledging the old ways. It matters to men like Junho. Park Junho was waiting at a private table in the back. He was 65, gray-haired but still powerful-looking, with scars on his hands and a face that had seen decades of violence. Two younger men stood behind him, bodyguards or lieutenants, Marcus couldn't tell. Junho studied them as they approached. So, he said in English, his accent thick but understandable. Jinwoo's sons. One from each world. He gestured to the seats across from him. Sit. They sat. A waitress brought tea, poured for everyone and quickly left. The private room felt smaller with Junho's presence filling it. You look like him, Junho said to Marcus. More than this one. He nodded at Sungmin. Jinwoo's face but softer. American soft. Marcus refused to rise to the bait. You wanted to meet. No. You wanted to meet. I was content to simply watch, to learn about Jinwoo's American life through his American son. But you forced this. Junho sipped his tea. Why? Because my father is dead, Marcus said. Whatever issues you had with him, they died with him. There's no point in pursuing this. Junho laughed, a harsh sound. You think it's that simple? Jinwoo betrayed us all. He destroyed the Sanjeongpa from within. 20 good men died because of his treachery. I spent 20 years in prison because of information he provided to police. And you think it ends because he had the good fortune to die of natural causes in America? He did what he did to protect his family, Sungmin said. To protect my mother and me. Would you have done differently? I wouldn't have fallen in love with the enemy's daughter in the first place. Then you've never been in love. Junho's expression darkened. Be careful, boy. I knew you when you were in diapers. Don't presume to lecture me about love. The tension in the room was palpable. Marcus could feel violence hovering just beneath the surface, ready to erupt. He needed to de-escalate, but he didn't know how. His father would have known. His father had navigated these situations for years. What would Jinwoo do? You're right, Marcus said suddenly. My father betrayed you. He made choices that led to suffering for many people, including you. I can't undo that. But I can acknowledge it. What my father did to you was wrong. Junho looked surprised. You admit this? I admit my father was complicated. He did both good and terrible things. He protected the people he loved, but that protection came at a cost to others. I'm sorry for what you went through. Genuinely sorry. Sungmin looked at Marcus with something like admiration. Junho studied him carefully, as if trying to determine if this was a trick. Your father never apologized, Junho said finally. Not once. Even at the end when everything was falling apart, he was proud. Defiant. He thought he was right. Maybe he was. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe it doesn't matter anymore. Marcus leaned forward. What do you want? What would make this right? Nothing can make it right. 20 years of my life are gone. My friends are dead. The world we built is dust. Then why are we here? Junho was silent for a long moment. Then he said something in Korean to Sungmin. They spoke back and forth for several minutes while Marcus sat helpless, unable to understand. Finally, Sungmin turned to him. He says our father took something from him. Before he left Korea, Jinwoo stole money, a significant amount that belonged to the Sanjeongpa. Junho believes Jinwoo used it to establish himself in America. He wants it back with interest. How much? Sungmin translated. Junho answered. $2 million American. Marcus almost laughed. I don't have that kind of money. My father left me a watch and some old photographs. His legitimate business went to paying off debts and funeral costs. There's nothing. Then you have a problem, Junho said in English. Because I want what is owed. And if Jinwoo's sons cannot pay, then they will pay in other ways. Is that a threat? It is a reality. Junho stood. You have 1 month. Find the money or find a way to make amends. Otherwise, I will collect my debt in blood, as is traditional. He left with his men, leaving Marcus and Sungmin alone in the private room. Jesus Christ, Marcus said. $2 million. Where would we even? It's not about the money, Sungmin interrupted. It's about face. Junho spent 20 years in prison nursing his hatred. He needs to feel like he won, like he got revenge. So what do? We find out if Jinwoo really did steal that money. And if he did, we find out what he did with it. The search for his father's hidden money consumed the next 2 weeks. Marcus extended his leave from work, making excuses to his principal and his girlfriend. The truth, that he was in Korea trying to find stolen mafia money to appease his father's old enemy, was too absurd to explain. Sungmin contacted everyone they could think of who might know about Jinwoo's finances. Old associates, the few remaining members of Soyeon's family who'd helped Jinwoo escape, even a retired accountant who'd handled money laundering for several gangs in the 1980s. The picture that emerged was complex. Jinwoo had indeed taken money when he fled. Not exactly stolen, but money he'd been holding for the Sanjeongpa that he'd used to buy his way out of Korea. He'd made deals, paid bribes, secured documents. By the time he reached America, he'd had maybe $500,000 left. But that was far from $2 million. He must have invested it, Marcus theorized. Built it up over the years. Or maybe Junho's number is inflated. 20 years in prison probably multiplied his anger and his estimate of what he's owed. They flew to America together, Sungmin's first time leaving Korea. Marcus took him to Brooklyn, to the old neighborhood, to the construction company his father had built. The current owner, a man who'd worked with Vincent for years, remembered him fondly but knew nothing about hidden money. Your old man was careful, the owner said. Kept his business clean, his books cleaner. If he had money stashed somewhere, he never told anyone. They visited Marcus's mother in Florida. Diane was shocked to see Marcus with a Korean man who looked exactly like him. But she adapted quickly. She'd always been pragmatic. Your father had secrets, she told them, sitting in her condo's living room while her new husband was at work. I knew that when I married him. He'd wake up sometimes from nightmares, speaking in a language I didn't understand. Korean, I guess. I never pushed him to explain. Did he have hidden accounts? Property we don't know about? Marcus asked. Diane thought about it. There was a safe deposit box. At a bank in Manhattan. He gave me the key years ago, told me to open it if anything ever happened to him. But when he died, I couldn't bring myself to do it. I gave the key to you, Marcus. It should be in the box of his things. Marcus and Sungmin looked at each other. The box under Marcus's bed. They flew back to New York immediately. In Marcus's apartment, they dumped out the contents of the shoebox. Photographs, diary, watch, and yes, a small key he'd never paid attention to, assuming it was for a door or a car long since gone. The bank was in Midtown Manhattan, imposing and marble-clad. Marcus filled out paperwork, showed identification, and was led to the vault. The safe deposit box was larger than he'd expected. Inside were documents, property deeds, stock certificates, bonds, and a letter addressed to my sons. Marcus's hand shook as he opened it. His father's handwriting, still familiar even though Vincent had been dead for 2 years. If you're reading this, I'm gone. And if you're together, Marcus and Sungmin, my American son and my Korean son, then you found each other. Good. That's how it should be. I've made many mistakes in my life. Leaving Seoul was one of them, though it was necessary. Never telling you the truth was another. I thought I was protecting you both by keeping my 2 worlds separate. Now I see I was protecting myself, from judgment, from having to face what I'd done. Sungmin. I'm sorry I left you and your mother. I'm sorry I wasn't there to teach you to ride a bike, or to stand by your side when you needed a father. I watched from afar when I could, through mutual contacts. I saw you grow into a good man despite my absence. I'm proud of you, even though I have no right to be. Marcus. I'm sorry I lied to you about who I was. I wanted you to have a clean slate, a life not tainted by my past. But blood remembers even when memory fades. You are Park Jinwoo's son as much as you are Vincent Romano's son. Both identities are real. Both are yours to claim or reject as you choose. In this box are the proceeds of my old life, invested and grown over 30 years. It should be worth approximately $2 million. I always knew that one day old debts would come due. If Park Junho survived prison, he would come looking for what he believes I owe. This money is for him. Pay it. End this. Don't let my mistakes become your burden. But know this, I didn't steal that money. I earned it in my own way doing the work I was asked to do. Junho believes I betrayed him for personal gain. The truth is I betrayed him for love. For your mother, Sungmin. For the chance to give you a life not defined by violence. Was it worth it? I don't know. I saved one family and destroyed another. I gave you both life but gave neither of you a father. These are the calculations we make when we're desperate, and we spend the rest of our lives wondering if we chose right. Be better than me. Be brothers. Take care of each other. And forgive an old man who did his best in impossible circumstances. Jinwoo/Vincent. Marcus read it twice, then handed it to Sungmin. His brother read in silence, his face working through emotions Marcus couldn't name. He knew, Sungmin finally said. He knew this day would come. He prepared for it. That's very him, isn't it? Always thinking 3 steps ahead. They sat in Marcus's apartment, surrounded by documents worth $2 million, holding a letter from a dead man who tried to solve their problems from beyond the grave. We could keep it, Marcus said. Tell Junho we couldn't find anything. Use this money to build something good. We could, Sungmin agreed. But we'd always be looking over our shoulders. And our father asked us to end this. Our father asked us to do a lot of things he never did himself. True. But maybe that's the point. Maybe he's giving us the chance to be better than he was. My father wasn't a monster, Marcus thought, clutching the letter. He was a man. And that, in itself, is the most difficult truth to accept. They decided to pay the debt. The meeting was arranged for a month to the day after their first encounter with Junho. Same restaurant, same private room. But this time Marcus and Sungmin came with power. Not the power of violence or threats, but the power of closure. Junho sat in the same seat, flanked by the same men. He looked older than Marcus remembered, or maybe it was just that Marcus was seeing him more clearly now, not as a threat but as another casualty of his father's choices. Marcus placed a briefcase on the table. $2 million. Invested proceeds from the money our father took 30 years ago. It's grown with interest and time. This is yours. Junho opened the briefcase, examining the documents inside. Stock certificates, bonds, bank transfer information. His expression was unreadable. Just like that, he said finally. You found it and you're giving it to me? Our father left us a letter, Sungmin said. He knew this day would come. He prepared for it. He asked us to pay his debt and end this cycle. Jinwoo always was a planner. Junho closed the briefcase. But money doesn't bring back lost years. Doesn't resurrect dead friends. No, Marcus agreed. It doesn't. Nothing can do that. But it's what we have to offer. Take it or don't, either way this is where it ends. My brother and I won't live our lives carrying our father's guilt. Junho studied them both. You are not like him. Either of you. Jinwoo was harder, more ruthless. You too, you have softness in you. Is that a criticism? Sungmin asked. It's an observation. Junho stood, picking up the briefcase. I accept this payment. Jinwoo's debt to me is settled. But I want you to understand something. I'm not doing this because of the money. I'm doing it because you came here with honesty. You acknowledged what your father did. You didn't make excuses or hide. That's worth more than any amount of money. He bowed formally, a gesture of respect. Marcus and Sungmin bowed back. Go home, Junho said to Marcus. Go back to America and live your life. Teach your students. Forget about all of this. I can't forget, Marcus said. This is part of who I am now. Then remember wisely. Remember that your father tried to do right even when he did wrong. Remember that he loved you both, even if he wasn't there. Junho turned to leave, then paused. And remember that you are brothers. In our world that matters more than money, more than revenge, more than anything. Take care of each other. He left. The private room felt larger without his presence, the air easier to breathe. Is it really over? Marcus asked. For him, yes. For us. Sungmin trailed off. I don't think it's ever really over. But it's different now. We're not running from it anymore. They left the restaurant and walked through Itaewon streets. Now familiar to Marcus after 6 weeks in Seoul. The city felt different than when he'd arrived. Less alien. More like a place he belonged. He could pick out a few Korean words from the conversations around him, could navigate the subway without consulting a map, could recommend restaurants to tourists looking lost. When are you going back? Sungmin asked. End of the week. I've pushed my leave as far as I can. And then what? I don't know. Go back to teaching, I guess. Try to figure out how to be Marcus Romano and Park Jin-woo's son at the same time. You'll figure it out. You're smart like he was. They stopped at a pojangmaka, a street food tent, and ordered soju and snacks. The owner, an elderly man, spoke to them in rapid Korean. Sungmin responded, and they all laughed at something Marcus didn't understand. What did he say? Marcus asked. He said we look like brothers. Asked if you were visiting from abroad. I told him you were coming home after a long time away. Sungmin poured soju for them both. That's how I think of it now. You weren't visiting. You were coming home. The soju warmed Marcus's chest, or maybe it was the sentiment. I never thought I'd have a brother. Never thought I'd have this whole other side of myself. Are you glad you came? Even with everything, Junho, the danger, all of it. Marcus thought about it. 6 weeks ago, he'd been standing in his Brooklyn apartment, holding a letter that would change everything. If he'd never opened it, never come to Seoul, he'd still be living in comfortable ignorance. He'd still be just Marcus Romano, history teacher, son of an ex-mobster, living an ordinary life. But he wouldn't have this. A brother, a heritage, a connection to something larger than himself. Yeah, Marcus said. I'm glad. They stayed at the pojangmaka for hours, talking about everything and nothing. Sungmin told stories about growing up in Seoul, about learning taekwondo, about the students he taught and the small triumphs and frustrations of running his own business. Marcus talked about teaching American teenagers who mostly didn't care about history, about his girlfriend who he probably needed to have a serious conversation with, about the strange experience of living in his father's shadow without ever really knowing who cast it. You should bring her here, Sungmin said. Your girlfriend. Let her meet me, see this part of your life. I don't know if we're there yet. I haven't even told her the truth about why I came here. You will. When you're ready. Sungmin refilled their glasses. And when you do, when you tell her everything, she'll either understand or she won't. That's how you'll know if she's right for you. It was simple advice, but it struck Marcus as profound. His whole life he'd been compartmentalizing. The good student who wasn't like his father. The teacher who avoided his family's past. The boyfriend who kept secrets. Maybe it was time to stop dividing himself into pieces and start being whole. Home isn't a place, Marcus realized as he looked around at the crowded street tent, at his brother's familiar face, at the city lights beyond. It's a feeling. And I've found it, not in the house I grew up in, but in the people who welcomed me as their own. Marcus's last few days in Seoul were spent collecting memories. He took hundreds of photos. The taekwondo studio, the streets where his father had walked, the Han River at sunset, the markets and temples and modern skyscrapers. He recorded Sungmin speaking Korean phrases, planning to practice on the plane and continue learning when he got home. They visited Soyeon again, and this time Marcus was able to say a few words in Korean. Thank you, sorry for your loss, you have a wonderful son. She cried and hugged him, and even though he couldn't understand most of what she said, he felt the love in it. She says you're always welcome here, Sungmin translated. She says this is your home too, whenever you want it to be. Marcus helped out at the taekwondo studio watching Sungmin teach. He saw his brother's patience with the students, the way he commanded respect while still being approachable. It reminded him of his own teaching style. And he realized they both found similar paths despite growing up worlds apart. You're good with them, Marcus observed after a class. I had to learn to be. When I first started teaching, I was too harsh, probably overcompensating for not having had a father to be harsh with me. But I realize these kids need guidance, not punishment. They need someone to believe in them. That's what I try to do too. Give them someone who believes they can be more than their circumstances. Like Jinwoo could have used. Yeah, like our father could have used. On Marcus's second to last night, Sungmin took him to a noribang, a Korean karaoke room. They rented a private space and spent hours singing terrible renditions of both Korean and American songs, laughing at each other's pronunciation and tone deafness. This is what brothers do, right? Marcus said between songs. Make fools of themselves together? According to every movie I've ever seen, yes. They sang until their voices were hoarse, drank until they were pleasantly buzzed, talked until there was nothing left unsaid. It felt like 20 years of brotherhood compressed into a single night. I'll come back, Marcus promised. This isn't goodbye. I know. And I'll visit you in America. I've always wanted to see New York. You can stay with me. I'll show you Brooklyn, take you to a Yankees game, teach you how to get a proper New York pizza. I'll show you how to make kimchi jjigae, take you to a proper Korean spa, teach you how to use chopsticks properly. They laughed, planning a future that felt both certain and impossible. How would they maintain this connection across an ocean? How would Marcus integrate this new identity into his American life? How would Sungmin make space for an American brother in his Korean world? But these were good questions, the kind that came from abundance rather than loss. On his last day, Marcus took a solo walk through the neighborhood where his father had lived as a young man. The buildings were different now, the street vendors and shops unrecognizable from whatever had existed in the 1980s. But the bones were the same. Narrow streets, steep hills, the particular quality of light that came from being surrounded by mountains. He tried to imagine his father walking these same streets at 25, full of ambition and danger, not yet knowing that love would force him to abandon everything. He tried to imagine Jinwoo's internal conflict, loyalty to the gang versus love for So-yeon, the life he knew versus the life he wanted. In a way, Marcus was facing similar questions now, not about violence or crime but about identity. Who was he? The American or the Korean? Vincent Romano's son or Park Jin-woo's son? Teacher or inheritor of a criminal legacy? The answer, he was starting to realize, was all of it. He didn't have to choose. He could be complicated, contradictory, a bridge between worlds. That's what his father had been, even if Vincent had tried to hide it. That's what Marcus could be openly, honestly. I thought I came here to understand him, Marcus thought as he stood on a street corner watching Seoul's evening rush. But what I've learned is about who I am. At the airport, Sungmin walked him to security. They stood awkwardly for a moment, two men who'd known each other for barely 2 months but who'd become family in that short time. Thank you, Marcus said. For the letter. For all of this. For being my brother. You don't thank family. We just are. They hugged and Marcus felt the weight of everything they'd been through together. The danger, the discoveries, the settling of old debts, the building of something new. I'll call you when I land, Marcus promised. You better. Marcus walked through security, turned back once to wave. Sungmin stood watching until Marcus disappeared around a corner. Then Marcus was alone again, but not lonely. He carried Seoul with him now, carried his brother, carried a fuller understanding of who he was and where he came from. The flight home was long, but Marcus didn't sleep. He was too busy thinking about what came next. The conversation with his girlfriend, the explanation to his students about where he'd been, the gradual integration of his Korean heritage into his American life. He thought about his father, both versions of him, Jinwoo and Vincent, the criminal and the businessman, the Korean and the Italian, the man who'd fled and the man who'd stayed. They were all the same person, just as Marcus was all his different selves at once. In his carry-on was a gift from Sungmin. A taekwondo dobok with Marcus's name embroidered in both English and Korean. For when you visit again, Sungmin had said. I'll teach you properly. Marcus smiled, imagining it. Learning martial arts from his brother, becoming proficient in Korean, maybe even teaching a summer semester in Seoul someday. The future felt full of possibilities that hadn't existed before. Brooklyn looked different when Marcus returned. Or maybe he was seeing it differently. The Italian restaurants where he'd grown up eating Sunday dinners now reminded him of Korean barbecue places. The Catholic church where his father's funeral had been held now made him think of Buddhist temples. Even his own reflection seemed different, his features suddenly readable as both Italian and Korean, depending on the light. His girlfriend, Sarah, met him at his apartment with questions. She'd been patient during his absence, but patience had limits. So, she said, sitting on his couch, you going to tell me what this was really about? Marcus had practiced this conversation on the flight home, but now that the moment was here, the words felt inadequate. How did you explain that your entire identity had been rewritten in 6 weeks? He started with the letter, showed her the photographs, the diary, explained about Sungmin and So-yeon and the Sanjeong-pa. He told her about Junho and the debt, about the money and the settlement, about learning he was half Korean and had a brother on the other side of the world. Sarah listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from confusion to shock to something that might have been awe. "Your father was Korean," she said when he finished. "Your whole life you thought you were Italian, and you're actually Korean. Half Korean. Half Polish from my mother's side. I don't really know what that makes me." "It makes you Marcus." Sarah reached for his hand. "I know this is huge and probably terrifying, but you're still you. You're just more complete now. Does that make sense?" "Yeah," Marcus said, feeling relief wash over him. "Yeah, it does. Can I meet him?" "Your brother." "You want to?" "Of course I want to. He's your family." She paused. "Are we okay? I mean, you kept this from me for weeks. I didn't know how to explain it. I still barely understand it myself. But I should have trusted you with it sooner. I'm sorry." Sarah squeezed his hand. "Just don't disappear like that again. If something this big happens, I want to be there with you. That's what partners do." The word partners settled warmly in Marcus's chest. "I'll do better. I promise." That conversation, as difficult as it was, became a template for others. Marcus told his mother the full story, including the parts about the money and Junho. Diane was surprisingly understanding. "I always suspected your father had a bigger past than he let on," she admitted over the phone. "I chose not to ask questions because I wanted the life we were building, not the life he'd left behind. Maybe that was selfish of me." "It was survival," Marcus said. "We all do what we need to do to survive." He told his principal at school, requesting permission to incorporate more Asian history into his curriculum, to teach about Korean culture, and the Korean War, and the immigrant experience. His principal agreed, even seemed excited about the expansion. Most challenging was telling his students. Marcus had always maintained strict boundaries between his personal life and his classroom, but this felt important enough to share. "I learned something about myself recently," he told his sophomore world history class one Monday morning. "I found out my father, who I'd always believed was Italian, was actually from Korea. I have a brother I never knew about. And I'm half Korean, which I'd lived 33 years without knowing." The students, typically restless and distracted, were silent. "I'm telling you this," Marcus continued, "because we talk a lot in this class about identity and immigration and what it means to be American. I thought I knew who I was. Turns out, identity is more complicated than that. It's not just where you're born or what your parents tell you. It's the whole picture. The parts you know and the parts you discover." A student raised her hand. "Is that why you seemed different when you came back? Like more confident or something?" Marcus smiled. "Maybe. When you accept all the parts of yourself, even the confusing or contradictory parts, there's a freedom in that." Over the following weeks, Marcus noticed subtle changes in himself. He started cooking Korean food using recipes Sungmin sent him, filling his apartment with smells that felt simultaneously foreign and familiar. He downloaded a language learning app and practiced Korean for 30 minutes every morning. He joined a Korean American community center in Queens, attending cultural events and slowly building connections with others who navigated multiple identities. He video called Sungmin twice a week, their conversations becoming a routine both brothers looked forward to. Sungmin would show him around the studio, introduce him to students, share small victories and frustrations. Marcus would do the same from Brooklyn, creating a bridge across the ocean that felt increasingly solid. "I told my students about you," Marcus said during one call. "They thought it was like a movie." "What did you tell them?" "That family is complicated. That people make difficult choices for survival. That identity isn't fixed. It evolves. Heavy stuff for teenagers. They can handle heavy stuff. Adults underestimate them." Sungmin laughed. Spoken like a true teacher. 3 months after returning from Seoul, Marcus received a package. Inside was a photo album Soyeon had put together. Pictures of Jin-woo as a young man, before he'd become Vincent, before everything went wrong. There was Jin-woo at 20, laughing with friends outside a bar. Jin-woo at 22, serious and intense, standing with other Sanjeongpa members. Jin-woo at 26, holding baby Sungmin, his expression tender in a way Marcus had rarely seen on Vincent Romano's face. The last photo was one Marcus recognized. Jinwoo and Soyeon together. The same photo he'd found in his father's diary. But this print was cleaner, undamaged. On the back, Soyeon had written in English, "He loved us both. Never doubt this." Marcus placed the photo on his bookshelf. Next to the one picture he had of Vincent holding baby Marcus. The two images side by side told the whole story. A man who'd lived 2 lives, loved 2 families, tried to do right by everyone and succeeded only partially. "I forgive you," Marcus said aloud to both photos. "I forgive you for the lies, for the secrets, for being human and flawed and doing your best in impossible circumstances. I forgive you." The words felt like releasing weight he'd been carrying without knowing it. The meaning of family evolves, Marcus thought. It's no longer just blood. It's the understanding of shared history, struggles, and the bonds formed in the most unexpected places. Sarah moved in with him that spring. They repainted the apartment together, and Marcus insisted on including Korean design elements. A traditional embroidery piece Soyeon had sent, a painting of Seoul's skyline, a shelf for his growing collection of Korean novels in translation. "It's like you're making space for all of yourself," Sarah observed, stepping back to admire their work. "That's exactly what I'm doing." For Marcus's birthday, Sungmin flew to New York, his first trip to America. Marcus met him at JFK, and seeing his brother emerge from customs felt surreal. Sungmin looked out of place and excited, his eyes wide as he took in the crowds and chaos of the airport. "It's louder than I expected," Sungmin said. "Welcome to New York." Marcus took his brother everywhere. The Statue of Liberty, Times Square, the Brooklyn Bridge. They ate pizza in Marcus's old neighborhood and Korean food in Queens, comparing the American versions to what Sungmin knew from home. They visited Marcus's school, where his students peppered Sungmin with questions about Korea and Taekwondo, and what it was like to discover you had an American brother. "They're good kids," Sungmin said afterward. "Curious, smart. Like their teacher. They liked you. Half of them want to take Taekwondo now." The highlight of the visit was a dinner Marcus organized with everyone important in his life. Sarah, his mother Diane and her husband, Tony, and other friends from the neighborhood, even his principal. Sungmin sat at the head of the table, welcomed into Marcus's American family, the way Marcus had been welcomed into his Korean one. During dessert, Diane raised her glass. "To family," she said. "However it finds us, wherever it takes us. To Vincent or Jinwoo or whatever name he used, for giving us these sons who found each other despite everything." They drank to that, and Marcus felt the two halves of his life finally merging into something whole. Later that night, after everyone had left, Marcus and Sungmin sat on the fire escape of Marcus's apartment, looking out over Brooklyn's lights. "Thank you for coming," Marcus said. "It means everything. We're brothers. This is what we do." Sungmin pulled out 2 small bottles of soju he'd brought in his luggage. "To Jinwoo. May he rest knowing we found each other." They drank, the soju sharp and warming. "Do you think he planned this?" Marcus asked. "The letter, the money, all of it? Do you think he knew we'd become close?" "I think he hoped. That's all anyone can do. Make choices and hope they lead somewhere good. His choices led to us. To this." Marcus gestured at the city below. "I'd say that's pretty good." "Me too." They sat in comfortable silence, 2 brothers who'd been strangers less than a year ago, now more family than many people who'd known each other their whole lives. A year after receiving the letter, Marcus returned to Seoul. This time Sarah came with him, eager to see the city and meet the Korean side of Marcus's family. Sungmin picked them up at the airport, and Marcus felt a surge of belonging as they drove through Seoul's streets. "It looks different than in your photos," Sarah said, pressed against the car window. "Wait until you see it at night," Marcus said. "That's when it really comes alive." They stayed with Sungmin, who'd moved to a larger apartment in anticipation of more visits. Soyeon cooked for them every night, elaborate meals that took hours to prepare and minutes to devour. She and Sarah bonded despite the language barrier, communicating through gestures and smiles and the universal language of women, welcoming other women into the family. Marcus's Korean had improved significantly. He could navigate restaurants, make small talk, understand the gist of conversations, even if the details sometimes escaped him. Sungmin was impressed. "You've been practicing." "Every day. I figured if I'm going to claim this identity, I should be able to speak the language. You're claiming it? Hell yes, I'm claiming it. I'm Korean American. Hyphenated identity. Best of both worlds. Sungmin smiled. I like that. Marcus taught a guest lecture at a university in Seoul, speaking about his experience discovering his Korean heritage and what it meant to navigate multiple cultural identities. The students were engaged and thoughtful, asking questions that pushed Marcus to articulate ideas he was still forming. Do you feel more American or more Korean? One student asked. Both. Neither. It depends on the day, the context, who's asking. Marcus paused. I think identity isn't a fixed thing. It's fluid, constantly being negotiated. I'm learning to be comfortable with that ambiguity. After the lecture, several Korean American students approached him, sharing their own stories of navigating between cultures, feeling not quite American enough in the US and not quite Korean enough in Korea. You gave us language for something we've been feeling, one young woman said. Thank you. Marcus felt humbled. His journey had been personal, but it resonated with something larger, the experience of diaspora, of complicated heritage, of finding home in multiple places. During the visit, Marcus and Sungmin made a pilgrimage to Busan, where Jinwoo had been born. They visited the neighborhood where he'd grown up, now gentrified and unrecognizable. They went to the cemetery where Jinwoo's parents, Marcus's grandparents, were buried, people Marcus had never known existed until this year. They left flowers and burned incense, performing rituals Sungmin taught him. Do you think they'd be proud of him? Marcus asked. Knowing what he became, what he did. I think they'd be proud of us. For finding each other. For ending the cycle of violence and secrets. Sungmin placed a hand on his shoulder. That's legacy too. Not just what you do, but what your children make of what you left behind. On their last night in Seoul, the four of them, Marcus, Sarah, Sungmin and Soyeon, had dinner at the same restaurant where Marcus and Sungmin had met Junho a year ago. But this time the atmosphere was celebratory rather than tense. Soyeon raised her glass, speaking in Korean. Sungmin translated. She says Jinwoo would be happy to see us all together like this. She says he spent his life keeping people separated, trying to protect everyone by keeping them apart. But we've chosen connection instead of separation. That's the best revenge against the forces that tried to keep us divided. They drank to that, soju for the adults, juice for propriety. I have something to tell you, Sungmin said. I've been accepted into an exchange program. I'll be teaching Taekwondo at a martial arts academy in New Jersey for 6 months, starting next fall. Marcus broke into a huge grin. Seriously? Seriously? I figured if you can come to Korea, I can spend real time in America. Learn what shaped you, see your world properly. You'll stay with us, Sarah said immediately. We have space. Are you sure? Your family, Marcus said. Of course we're sure. The conversation turned to planning. What Sungmin would teach, places they'd visit together, how they'd split their time between New York and Korea going forward. It felt natural now, this back and forth between worlds, this life that spanned oceans. Later, Marcus stood on the balcony of Sungmin's apartment, looking out at Seoul's nighttime skyline. Sarah joined him, wrapping an arm around his waist. You seem at peace, she said. I am. For the first time in a long time, maybe ever, I feel like all the pieces fit. Marcus pulled her close. I know who I am now, where I come from, what I'm carrying forward. And what are you carrying forward? Marcus thought about his father, about the choices Jinwoo had made and the consequences that rippled through decades. He thought about violence and love, about secrets and truth, about the complicated work of being human. The good parts, he said finally. The love, the resilience, the ability to start over. I'm leaving behind the secrets and the violence and the shame. Just taking what serves me, what serves us. That's beautiful. That's what you do with inheritance. You take what works and transform what doesn't. They stood there, looking at the city that had once been strange to Marcus and now felt like a second home. Below them, Seoul pulsed with life. People eating and drinking and laughing, living their complicated lives, navigating their own identities and histories. This journey wasn't just about my father, Marcus thought. It was about understanding who I am. The next morning at the airport, Marcus hugged Sungmin goodbye. See you in New York, Marcus said. See you in New York, Sungmin echoed. It wasn't goodbye. It was see you later. Because that's what family did. They showed up for each other, across oceans and time zones and cultural differences. They chose connection over convenience. On the flight home, Marcus pulled out his journal and began writing. He'd been documenting this entire journey, thinking maybe his students would want to read it someday, or maybe he'd want to remember exactly how it felt to discover you're not who you thought you were and find that's actually okay. He wrote about the letter that started everything, about meeting Sungmin and So-yeon, about confronting Junho and settling old debts. He wrote about learning Korean and cooking kimchi, and standing in cemeteries talking to ghosts. He wrote about the moment he realized he could be both Korean and American, that identities could coexist rather than compete. Most of all, he wrote about family, not the simple, straightforward kind where everyone knows their place and no one questions the story they've been told, but the complicated, messy, chosen kind where truth matters more than comfort and connection matters more than convention. What are you writing? Sarah asked, waking from a nap. Everything. I'm writing everything down so I don't forget. You won't forget this. No, Marcus agreed. But I want to remember it clearly. Every detail. Because this is the story I'll tell our kids someday. About their grandfather who lived 2 lives. About their uncle in Korea. About how family is something you discover as much as something you're born into. Sarah smiled. Our kids. Eventually. Maybe. If you want. I want. She leaned against his shoulder. And I want them to know all of this. The whole complicated truth. Marcus kissed the top of her head, feeling grateful. For the letter that had disrupted his life. For the brother he'd found. For the woman beside him who'd accepted all of his complexity without flinching. The plane carried them over the Pacific, between worlds, between identities. But Marcus didn't feel torn anymore. He felt bridged, a connection between East and West, past and present, the life his father had fled and the life Marcus was building. Epilogue. Legacy redefined. 5 years later, Marcus stood in the backyard of a house in Queens, bigger than his old apartment, with space for a family. Sungmin was visiting from Korea, where he'd returned after his American teaching stint but now came twice a year. So-yeon had come too, her first trip to America, excited to meet her new grandchild. Marcus's daughter, 3-year-old Yuna Jean Romano, ran between her father and uncle, laughing as they chased her. She had Marcus's eyes and Sarah's smile, and she was growing up hearing both English and Korean, eating both pizza and bibimbap, learning that identity could be expansive rather than limiting. She has Jinwoo's spirit, So-yeon said in Korean, which Marcus now understood fluently. Fearless, always exploring. I hope she has his intelligence without his recklessness, Marcus replied in Korean, making So-yeon laugh. Sarah was pregnant again. A boy this time, due in 3 months. They'd already chosen the name. Vincent Jinwoo Romano. A name that honored both sides of the family, both versions of the grandfather the child would never meet but would grow up hearing stories about. Marcus's mother Diane watched from the porch, comfortable now with the Korean side of the family, having learned some Korean herself and made friends with So-yeon despite the language barrier and complicated history. This is what he wanted, Diane said to Marcus when he came to sit beside her. Your father. This, all of us together, the secret's out in the open. He never thought it was possible, but if he could see this, he'd be happy. You think? I know. He used to have nightmares about his 2 worlds colliding, destroying everything. But look. They collided and created something beautiful instead. Marcus looked at the gathering. His American family and Korean family, mixing seamlessly. Tony was attempting to learn taekwondo moves from Sungmin. Sarah and So-yeon were looking at baby clothes together. Yuna was teaching her grandmother Diane how to count in Korean. This was legacy. Not the violence or the secrets or the pain, but this family choosing love over division, truth over comfort, connection over fear. Marcus's students, now college-aged, still kept in touch. Many had written college essays about his story, about what his journey taught them about identity and heritage. Some had traced their own hidden histories, discovering complexities in their families they'd never known to look for. The ripple effects of one letter, one decision to seek truth, had spread further than Marcus could have imagined. As the sun set over Queens, casting golden light across the gathering, Marcus felt his father's presence, not haunting but peaceful. Jean-Woo and Vincent, the Korean gangster and the Italian-American businessman, the absent father and the complicated man, they were all at rest now. We all have stories to tell, Marcus thought, watching his daughter chase fireflies in the twilight. And the best ones are yet to come. Uncle Sungmin. Yuna called out in Korean. Push me on the swing. Sungmin obliged, lifting his niece onto the swing set Marcus had installed last summer. As he pushed her higher, her delighted screams filling the air, Marcus snapped a photo with his phone. These were the memories he'd passed down, not of violence or betrayal or secrets kept, but of joy and connection and family choosing each other again and again. Thank you, Marcus said quietly, not sure if he was talking to his father, his brother, the universe, or all three. For what? Sarah asked, joining him on the porch. All of it. The journey. The truth. This. He gestured at the scene before them. Sarah took his hand. You did this. You chose to open that letter. You chose to go to Korea. You chose truth and family and growth. This is your legacy, not your father's. Our legacy, Marcus corrected. Mine and Sungmin's. And now Yuna's and this little guy's. He placed a hand on Sarah's pregnant belly. We get to decide what story to tell, what to carry forward. And what story is that? Marcus watched as Sungmin taught Yuna a simple taekwondo stance, his brother's patience and care evident in every movement. He watched as Diane and Soyeon laughed over something. Two mothers bonded by their love for the same complicated man and their desire to support the family he'd left behind. A story about how love transcends borders and secrets, Marcus said. About how family isn't just given. It's chosen and built and fought for. About how identity is big enough to hold contradictions, strong enough to span oceans. That's a good story. It's our story. And it's just beginning. As darkness fell, they moved the gathering inside. Marcus's kitchen filled with the smells of both Korean and American food, conversations mixing languages, laughter universal. Yuna fell asleep in Sungmin's arms, exhausted from the day's excitement. Marcus looked around at everyone gathered in his home. This chosen, complicated, beautiful family, and felt complete. The letter that had arrived 5 years ago hadn't destroyed his life. It had cracked it open, letting in light he hadn't known he needed. He'd been afraid that learning the truth about his father would diminish him somehow, would make Marcus less himself. Instead, it had made him more complete, more whole, more capable of love and forgiveness and growth. That night, after everyone had gone to bed or home, Marcus sat at his desk and pulled out the original letter from Lee Sungmin. He'd kept it all these years, the thin paper now soft from repeated handling. He read it again, marveling at how a few paragraphs could change everything. Your father had another life here. Another family. Another son. If you want to know who your father really was, who you really are, come to Seoul. He had gone. He had learned. He had become. Marcus pulled out fresh paper and began writing his own letter. One that Yuna and Vincent would read when they were old enough to understand. A letter explaining their grandfather's complicated history, their Korean heritage, the brother-uncle in Seoul who loved them, the choices people make when survival and love collide. He wrote about secrets and truth, about the courage it takes to face uncomfortable realities, about the grace required to forgive the dead for being human. He wrote, Dear Yuna and Vincent, by the time you read this, you'll probably have questions about your grandfather, about why your father speaks Korean and has a brother in Seoul, about why our family gatherings look different from other families. The truth is complicated, but you deserve to know it. Your grandfather was a man who made difficult choices in impossible circumstances. He wasn't perfect. He lied, he ran, he left people behind. But he also loved deeply, tried to protect those he cared about, and ultimately gave me and your uncle the tools to find each other. I'm writing this because I don't want you to grow up with the secrets I grew up with. I want you to know your whole history, the Korean and the American, the criminal and the legitimate, the heroic and the cowardly. All of it is yours to claim or reject or reinterpret as you choose. Family is complicated. Identity is fluid. Truth is sometimes painful but always worth pursuing. These are the lessons your grandfather taught me without meaning to, and they're what I hope to pass on to you. Love across borders. Choose truth over comfort. Build bridges instead of walls. Honor the past without being trapped by it. This is our family's legacy now. With all my love, your father. Marcus sealed the letter, dated it, and placed it in his desk drawer. Someday, when his children were ready, he'd give it to them. For now it was enough to know it existed. A time capsule of this moment, this understanding, this hard-won peace. He looked at the photo on his desk. Himself and Sungmin in Seoul, arms around each other's shoulders, grinning at So-yeon behind the camera. Two brothers who shouldn't have existed, let alone found each other. But they had. Against all odds, across all obstacles, they had. And that, Marcus thought as he turned off the light and headed to bed, was a story worth telling. If you've ever had to make peace with your past or uncover the truth about your family, remember this. The journey is worth it. The discomfort leads to growth. The questions lead to understanding. And sometimes the secrets we fear most are hiding the connections we need most. Subscribe to The Journey. Share your story. Like if you believe in embracing the hidden parts of your story. Because we all have stories to tell, and the best ones are yet to come.